Welcome to all of us. My name is Rachel Wade, and today I get the pleasure of having my friend Frances with me. Frances, could you introduce yourself to the All of Us family?
Yeah, of course. My name is Frances, and I am 38 years old. I live in San Francisco. I was a former tech employee turned ministry person.
Yeah.
I don't really know how to say that, but I work for Epic Church full time as community director. I've been in the Bay for 8 years, and yeah.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your Jesus journey. How did you, who introduced you to Jesus, and what is your Jesus journey like today? What's your faith like today?
Yeah, for sure. So my parents became born again when I was 2, and so I was kind of like born into the faith. This is what I've always known. My mom's twin was the one that brought her to Christ, and so it had a definite, like a ripple effect on our family, and that's how it started. Growing up, I was in church a lot. I went to youth camps, I did all the things. I was in church and Bible studies and all of those, and yeah, I probably became born again like 3 or 4 times in my lifetime.
Which a lot of us have that story, especially in our youth.
Yeah, exactly. But I think I fully embraced my faith and sort of made it my own probably when I was 30 years old. I was going through something really, really difficult, and I just, at my lowest point, I think I just finally surrendered and recommitted my life to Jesus and said, I'm committing my life to you. It's yours now. I'm gonna follow you wherever you are, because my life, is yours, and nothing else matters.
Yeah. And I think for some of us, we can definitely relate to this, where we need to hit that brick wall in order for us to say, ooh, the way that I'm doing things is not working out. Yeah. And we hit those painful situations. And I know I personally can relate to that too, where you go through a painful season and you're like, God, I totally surrender. And so it seems like when you got into your 30s, that's what happened to you. So take us back to that painful circumstance that was painful, but also catapulted you into the faith that you now have.
Yeah, for sure. I moved to the U.S. 8 years ago, and it was really, when people ask me, I tell them it's for family, which is true. I have family in the U.S. My parents are here, but I moved because of a relationship that I was in. I entered that relationship in good faith. I eventually moved here. We got married, but shortly after, our wedding, he started abusing me. And I have seen red flags before. I chose to ignore them. I thought I was in control, and I was very prideful about that I was just like, oh, it's going to be fine. It's going to be okay. It's not that bad. But really, it was pretty bad. A lot of emotional torture. I was sexually assaulted within marriage. And so it was just a cycle of abuse. And I ended up there, not passively. There were choices that I made that led me in that situation, and I chose to stay in it for a couple of years. Finally, at my breaking point, eventually left. But it was a very difficult time.
Well, first of all, I want to say that I'm sorry that happened to you, and nobody deserves sexual abuse or abuse of any kind. But you did in the blog, and today you mentioned that there were some things that you were dealing with, the root of how you even got to be with this man. And I wanted to talk about that. You mentioned pride, you mentioned insecurity. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. At first, I wasn't aware of what I was bringing into the situation. Yes, my ex-husband was very abusive, and that's one conversation. But the other part of that is, there were a lot of things that led me to be codependent. One of those things, which I think is the biggest idol in my life that I continue to struggle with, is the need for approval. And, there were many things that have happened to me in the past and previous relationships, even in my family relationships, that have led and shaped that need for approval. And so I think it was just something that was on a very unhealthy level. And through intense counseling, I had to confront that. I came to realize that, and then it was only then that I was able to take steps towards health. The admission and the acceptance that was a thing within me was really the first step, the awareness.
So good. And so, as many of you know, there's many names that we have for God, and one of those is Emmanuel.
Yes.
which in the Hebrew means God with us.
Yes.
And so in the midst of this painful circumstance, in the midst of you going to counseling and working things out and growing your faith, do you believe, first of all, that God is Emmanuel, God with us? And if so, how did you see him through your story?
Yeah, I definitely believe that God is with us. That is one of my favorite names of God. It's just who he is. We are never outside of his grace. And for me, how this played out is through provision of every kind. It was just wild how God, in this very dark season in my life, provided for me in terms of housing, in terms of a community here in Epic Church, in terms of, even relational provision. What I couldn't get through marriage, I was able to get from my community. Just the friendship, the companionship, the encouragement. And even in spiritual provision, like God really used this time to shape me and to mold me into who I already was. Like I had an identity in Christ that was already very true about me, but I wasn't aware of that. And so he restored that in me through this dark time.
So you use the word restore, and I looked up what does restoration mean, in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and the dictionary definition is that you are restoring back to its original state, right? If you think about restoring a house, that maybe was made in the 1850s, and you want to take it back to that state. But the cool thing about our God is that not only does he restore, but that he restores and he gives abundantly. And so you're talking about spiritual abundance, you're talking about spiritual restoration, physical restoration, in every way possible. You've seen God's hand in these other areas of your life. And so I just want to say that that's so encouraging to those of us, but also identifying the root to get to the restoration, because as we say this a lot around here at Epic, but we say, we have a part to play, and then God has a part to play. And so it seems like you played your part, and that's super encouraging. So really quickly, I want to give you these statements and you finish them. All right, so God is
a redeeming God.
God's love for all of us is
unchanging.
All of us are better when we
let God write our story.
Beautiful. And last, talk to the one that's out there today, Frances. Talk to the one that is lonely. Talk to the one that has been through a painful circumstance, perhaps abused just like you. What words of encouragement would you like to speak into her life today?
Yeah, for sure. When we are in a traumatic experience and when we're being abused, it's really difficult to be hopeful. And sometimes, a lot of times you actually need to be in community. And so my encouragement is be in community, fight isolation, because that is just the devil's playground. You don't want to be there. You don't want to be in a swirl by yourself. Get help. It took me a really, really long time to ask for help because, again, of that pride. But we all need help from time to time. And that's why being in community, knowing what the resources are around resources available around you is really important, and leverage on those resources. But yeah, like even when you don't feel like it, even when you're in a deep, intense emotion of sadness or loneliness, pray. Like sometimes even without words, but just putting your heart before God and having a posture of prayer and dependence really, really helps. Worship, read the word. Find God in those dark places. He's there.
Thank you, Frances. Thank you for sharing your story. To hear the rest of Frances's story, please go to allofus.net. On the blog portion on the website, you'll get even more details about Frances's testimony. So thanks for joining us, and this is All of Us. Bye.